You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni with you after a very tough night of baseball for the Atlanta Braves, who were hoping to carry some momentum up to Philadelphia. Well, they had momentum until they lost it, and that came in the bottom half of the third inning as the Phillies struck for some big-time home runs throughout the game, but none bigger than the first of two on the night for Bryce Harper in a 10-2 victory over the Atlanta Braves to take a 2-1 lead in the National League Division Series. We got a lot to talk about, including the starting pitching decision, the lack of offense, and, of course, what the Braves are planning to do in Game 4 with their backs squarely against the wall. We'll get into all of that here in just a moment. Before we do, though, I want to remind you to subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta right here on YouTube. Click the bell. You get a notification every time we drop a new episode. Leave us those comments, those likes. Share the show with a friend if you appreciate what we're doing. Well, we appreciate you appreciating that. So let's just make it a mutual appreciation society. Even on a tough night, we're going to be here to talk about it. That's what we do. Also, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Jake, I think both of us have spent a lot of time talking about what Game 3 needed to be for the Atlanta Braves, and it quite simply was not what it needed to be in any shape or form.
It was not. And, coming into the series, you knew this was going to be the game where this was a possibility. You didn't know who the Braves were going to throw in this one, and certainly worked out that way. Unfortunately, this is all too familiar to what we faced last season, but hopefully Strider and the Braves will flip the script in Game 4.
Yeah, I would say the phrase is eerily reminiscent of what we were dealing with a year ago when you talk about some uncertainty in the starting rotation. But unfortunately, we're also going to have to talk about this offense, which has not been able to replicate its success over the course of the regular season at large. Also, not their success against the Philadelphia Phillies head-to-head, where they met 13 times and outscored the Phillies, averaging nearly 6 runs per game. The Braves have scored 6 runs in the series, and that quite simply is one of the many trends that's going to have to change. Let's jump inside the line score and box score of this one, which unfortunately reads like this. It's a 10-2 win for the Phillies. They had 10 runs on 11 hits, no errors. They left 5 men on base. The Braves, meanwhile, just 2 runs on 10 hits, no errors, left 11 men on base. We're going to talk about some really weird trends here in a moment. Winning pitcher, though, Aaron Nola. He pitched 5 2/3 innings and was able to limit the Braves, missed a lot of bats, and give the Phillies exactly what they needed to set themselves up to take the advantage of the series. And also on a night in which the Braves did not have the same kind of certainty with who they were going to be handing the ball to. We didn't even know who it was going to be until this morning. And then, of course, we found out Bryce Elder was going to get that chance. And I know, Jake, you and I talked about this a lot, about who was going to get it. And I think we both kind of landed on Bryce Elder being the most likely, though Atlanta did have other options. Elder, however, was knocked out in the third inning after allowing the Phillies to score 6 times. And it was just quite simply just an absolute mess by the time the Braves got out of that frame, and it really did a number on their chances of winning this game.
They had some options, but as I said, coming in, not necessarily options you felt great about. I mean, it was a Bryce Elder who had a rough second half. It's an A.J. Smith-Shawver's, a 20-year-old that has 5 starts at the big league level, or it's some sort of opener. And it wasn't great. And like I said at the top, I mean, this is a game you knew that if the Braves were going to win, they were going to have to slug their way to a win. And while they did pick up 10 hits, they didn't get the 6 home runs that the Phillies got in this game. So, it all just kind of culminated in what we thought it could be. But, I mean, I think Bryce Elder was the right choice. I think it was also not the only choice, but I think it was the best choice that you had at the time. And if he could have replicated anything like what he did in the first half, you feel pretty good. And those first 2 innings, it certainly felt like he had something going there. And it felt like first half Bryce Elder, but certainly things fell apart there in that third inning.
They did. We're going to talk about that, the decision in that inning and the Braves not going to the bullpen maybe as quickly as some people would have expected or would have liked. Most certainly, Brian Snitker talked about it after the game. We'll get into that in a moment. But, just to kind of button up the conversation about who starts and what the expectation was, if you start an opener, you're still going to have to turn to, I think, A.J. Smith-Shawver and Bryce Elder to cover some innings. Even if you're able to do so, then there's the problem of this offense not being able to come through and get the hits that it needs to. And unfortunately, the Phillies did not have that problem. Bryce Harper came up huge in this one. 2 home runs for him, 4 runs knocked in, none bigger than his 3-run homer that highlighted the 6-run third inning for the Phillies that put them in the driver's seat for good in this one. Nick Castellanos got that inning started, though, with his first of 2 home runs on the day. And the Phillies also got homers from Trey Turner and Brandon Marsh in this one. And Jake, as I look at the Braves offense here, and I know we're going to probably dissect this way more than we want to, and probably way more than people want to hear about it, because it's become an unfortunate trend for this team. You look at what this lineup was able to do. They had 10 hits. The Phillies had 11 hits. You just dropped the big stat. The Phillies had 6 home runs. The Braves, meanwhile, had 1 extra base hit in this game. But the top 5 men in the order, the guys that you expect to be getting on base, picking up hits, they went 9 for 22 and reached base 11 out of their 24 plate appearances. But still, it resulted in just 2 runs in total for the Braves. This one, I think, has you scratching your head for a number of different reasons. And probably, if you had any, I don't, you do, you can pull your hair out over this one.
Yeah, no, it's a frustrating one because, yeah, you look at the box score, you see Acuna 2 hits, Albies 2 hits, Riley's 2 hits, Olsen a hit and a walk, Ozuna 2 hits, and you're thinking, okay, this offense is going, and the top of the order is doing its job, and they're putting up big numbers, but they're not getting the home runs that they're accustomed to seeing, and they're not being able to come up in those clutch spots. And this offense all year that we've talked about is so deadly top to bottom. Well, the bottom's not showing up. No. And it's really, affecting what the Braves are able to do here. Darno over 4, Rosario over 2 with 2 strikeouts. He looks lost at the plate. Arcia did have a hit later in the game and had an RBI, but Michael Harris over 4. He has not been very good at the plate in this series. So it's really, what carried this offense all year and made it the best offense was 1 through 9. You could count on them having an impact. And the first 3 games of this series, it was mostly just, the guys at the top, or nobody for that matter. And now the guys at the top are getting it done, but nobody at the bottom is really backing them up, and you're not getting those home runs. So it is frustrating. You want to look at a silver lining. They did get 10 hits in this one. And like I said, the top of the order was getting on base, and you feel like at some point this offense has to wake up, but it's a 5-game series. You're running out of time. It's do or die. They got to get it going now.
Yeah, no, it is do or die. And I thought that maybe in the final, 3 innings of the game in game 2, that maybe that was a harbinger of things to come, because while they weren't racking up double-digit hits at that point, they were at least hitting the big home runs, and that was the difference maker in this one. I mean, Bryce Harper, he's a player that, Brian Snitker said after the game, I mean, he got peppered with all kinds of questions, including something we'll get to a little bit later in the show about just the strategy that you might employ in the 3rd inning, but also just in general. Do you just think about walking this guy? And yeah, you can divide it up a number of different ways with a runner, with a base open. You could put him on, but you're kind of dealing with a slippery slope at that point. If you keep putting guys on base, you can't walk him every time. You're going to have to approach him at some point. But he's a guy that, and Snit said this, that, when you shine that big light, or when that bright light is on, that Bryce Harper is going to shine. And he did that tonight for the Phillies. He was 2 for 5 and knocked in 4 runs, and the Phillies out hitting the Braves, out slugging the Braves. That's something that, I felt like these are 2 offenses that you could expect them to be some back and forth, some punch, counter punch. But Jake, I didn't really see the Braves offense being kind of as listless right now. And again, it's a weird thing to say after piling up a whole bunch of hits and looking at the top 5 men in the order. But situationally speaking, the Braves have not come through with the big hits, to your point.
They have not. I mean, you felt like there were still opportunities in this game where, if they got the 3-run homer, they'd be right back in it. It's a momentum thing too. I mean, you give up 6 runs in the 3rd inning, you're on the road and you get down 6-1 like that. That's got to be somewhat deflating. And at that point, it's going to take a 3-run homer for you to even get back in the game. I mean, it's just hard, as good as this offense is, to climb out of that in the spot that you're in. And you do wonder maybe just some pressure is getting to them a little bit in these spots. But again, I thought they had some chances. You had the spot, where Harris came up with 2 on, and you had already scored a run in the inning, and he swings at the first pitch, rolls over it to first base, and you had Acuna on deck there. I mean, Riley hit a ball that was just at the warning track that was close to getting out as well, with Acuna on second base. So, I mean, there were some moments here or there where you just felt like, okay, you get a big swing here, you get back in the game and give yourself a chance, and just not able to come up with that big swing in this one like they did in game 2.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there certainly weren't enough big swings to help answer the Phillies' 10-run attack. And that, I think, is one of the bigger things, is the Phillies, not only did they score the 6 runs, but they kept adding on throughout the night, and adding on. A lot of those came in the form of home runs. We've got a lot more to talk about on this edition of the Braves Postcast, so stick with us. We're going to jump into the Game 3 pitching plan for the Braves, which quite simply was not able to get done the job that the Braves were hoping that it would. We'll also talk about what we saw out of Aaron Nola, which, if you're a Phillies fan, you had to be thrilled with. If you're a Braves fan, you had to kind of wonder what this matchup was going to be, and it might have played out exactly the way that you were afraid it was going to. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break and tell you about one of our great sponsors of this show. Want to tell you about Game Time, who have been one of the sponsors for us throughout the course of the year. They're a sponsor of this edition of the Braves Postcast. Game Time's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get those images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You buy those tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps on their app, and you are set. Those tickets go directly to your phone. You don't have to dig around and try to find the email to get where you're going. Snag those tickets without the stress at Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Those terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code Locked On MLB for $20 off that first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, well, Jake, we have to talk about this pitching matchup for Atlanta, which we knew was going to be a difficult one to try to match what you were going to face in Aaron Nola, who had already looked magnificent against the Miami Marlins in a 7-inning scoreless outing, and now he was able to come out and handcuff the Braves as well. I want to talk a little bit about that because it's a big reason why the Braves offense did not find the big hits, but I don't think we can bury the lead. The Game 3 plan for the Braves and for Brian Snitker, which waited all the way until the morning of to go with Bryce Elder over any other option, that didn't pan out, as we touched on briefly, but I think it's worth kind of expounding on here. I don't know that there were a lot of great options. You could go with an opener. You could go with A.J. Smith-Shawver. I think at some point you needed A.J. and for Bryce to give you some kind of innings if you wanted to get to the bullpen in good shape. The offense we've already talked about, it's going to have to answer the call as well, but Elder's struggles in this Phillies onslaught was a pretty tough hole to try to dig out of if you're the Atlanta Braves. 2 2/3 innings for Elder. He allowed, 9 hits, 6 runs, all of them earned, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, and 2 home runs as well. It all came in that disastrous 3rd inning of work. He was perfect in the first 2 frames, and I guess I can understand to a certain extent if you're Brian Snitker feeling like maybe you give him that one more batter and you try to see if he's able to work his way out of trouble and limit the Phillies to just 1 run in the 3rd inning, but it was that quick. The swing from Bryce Harper, you said this after Game 2, one swing of the bat can change the complexity of an entire game, and that's exactly what happened.
It did, and we can get into the discussion of should you pitch to Bryce Harper or don't let him beat you, that kind of situation. But look, I understand where Snit's coming from, and Braves fans aren't going to like to hear this. He should have had somebody ready. I mean, that's bottom line. But, the way that Elder pitched in those first 2 innings, look, I was thinking, is he really going to get through 5? I mean, he looked like the good Bryce Elder, and I just think that 3rd inning, things kind of sped up on Snitker and the coaching staff. And next thing you know, you're sitting there and Bryce Harper's at the plate with an opportunity to break this game wide open, and you don't have anybody ready. That can't happen. The Castellanos home run, I think at that point you got to start getting things stirring. After Marsh gets the hit, you got to get somebody throwing. I mean, at that point, you got to be thinking, okay, we could get to Harper in this inning in a big spot. Do we have somebody prepared for him? And they didn't. And I think that's a mistake. And that's certainly on Snitker and the coaching staff. I think you've got to have somebody ready for that situation. Not only that, he faced 2 more batters after that both reached and came around to score. And that's huge. And Eddie Rosario probably needs to make that catch. Somebody, a left fielder, I think needs to make that catch as well. And it's a big difference between 4-1 and 6-1. When Tonkin comes in, gives up the hit to Real Muto in the gap there, a ball that, had a 206 expected batting average. That's a ball that needs to be caught. And that's a big play, but still you got to have somebody ready for Harper. Bottom line, whether it's Hand, and I know Hand gave up the home run to Harper earlier. That's after Hand came in and got out of a big jam when he first came in and then sat down and came back out. So you cannot say, that would have happened, same situation. But that's what you have Hand there for, to face Harper in a game-changing situation, and you didn't have him ready.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And you might have seen, I posted on social media. I mean, this is why Brad Hand's on this roster, is to come into situations like that to handle left-handed hitters and to hopefully help you with that run prevention. I mean, I know obviously he gave up a home run to Bryce Harper later. He did so, in the 5th inning. But why Brad Hand was not ready and available in that 3rd inning once Harper came up is a question that in hindsight, we're going to be asking ourselves a lot. And I'm sure Brian Snitker's asked himself, if you have it to do over again, obviously you go about it a different way. But you know what I think was a key play in that inning was Trey Turner's infield hit. It was just out of the reach of the diving Austin Riley as a ground ball that Bryce Elder would, want to get out of the inning with. Orlando Arcia stops it from scoring a run and keeps Marsh at third base. But once that brought up Harper, the fact that there was really nobody ready to come in and face him with the short leash that typically goes with the postseason. I know that you want to believe that you're just one pitch away from getting out of the inning. But on the flip side of that, you're only one pitch away from one swing changing the whole game. And I just feel like in a postseason situation, that's just where you need to have somebody up and ready. And I think Brad Hand was the answer to that question. Instead, it was Michael Tonkin. But as you mentioned, he came in 2 batters later, the double by Real Muto. Again, and then you've already covered this pretty well. There's a big difference in being down 6-1 and 4-1, just in terms of the optics of it. And I think if there's any vibe in that dugout, that's going to be a big difference in the 6 runs and the 4 runs and what you're facing as far as the deficit's concerned. But before we talk the whole thing into a circle, 11 batters came to the plate in that third inning. And I think if the Braves had it to do over again, they might go about this a completely different way. And for Brad Hand coming in at too little too late, that just, I think, kind of makes you just wonder what might have happened in that encounter. I don't know that there's enough that's going to be done with the run prevention the rest of the night to stop the Phillies from winning this baseball game, but at least you'd feel like you have a chance. And the Braves offense, which we'll get back into momentarily, it just was nowhere to be found when it came to the key hits. And that is the combination that led to this loss. 10-2 makes it look pretty rough. The big inning is the one that really just put the Braves behind the 8 ball, even though they had a whole bunch of outs to work with.
It did. And look, you look at the final score and it's 10-2, but I mean, you go back to these little moments and like I said, once you fall behind 6-1, you are looking for that 3-run homer just to get back in the game. If it's 4-1, you can work on just trying to chip away and score a run here or there and get back in it. But it's just that huge difference right there, really, in just that one play. The Bryce Harper home run, yeah, that swung the momentum. It's all on their side. But for me, it's really that Real Muto double that really just kind of made it yeah, it was. And especially with they already have a Noli on the mound. And like you said, with the guys you knew were probably going to pitch in this game for the Braves, likely the Phillies were going to add on some more runs. Now, if it stays close, that may change the pitchers that Snicker uses in those situations. And maybe you're able to hold them down a little bit longer and give your offense a chance. But yeah, it completely, changed the complexion of this game. Obviously the Harper homer. And then, like I said, as you rightfully just said, the backbreaker, the Real Muto double just kind of put it out of reach there.
Yeah, let's go through some pitching lines here. I mentioned Aaron Nola, 5 2/3 innings, 2 runs, both earned, 6 hits, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. He was able to get the punch outs when he needed to, and then the Phillies were able to turn it over to their bullpen, which kept the Braves scoreless the rest of the way. Meanwhile, for Bryce Elder, 2 2/3 innings, 5 hits, 6 runs, all of them earned, a walk, 4 strikeouts, the 2 home runs. Michael Tonkin was the man who gave up the 2-run double by Real Muto. That's a play that, as we just talked about, is one that just made it that much worse. Brad Hand did give up a solo home run to Bryce Harper, but I tend to agree with you. I think it would have been a different feel if Hand was coming into that spot than it was after he'd already gone out, gotten out of a jam, then sat back down and come back out again. There's just a different feel, a different level of adrenaline that comes with that. And then you had A.J. Smith-Shawver come in, 2 2/3 innings for him, 3 hits, all of them home runs, so 3 runs allowed because they were all solo shots. I know if you can necessarily do this, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, but if we were looking for A.J. Smith-Shawver's ability to come in and maybe dominate, or that versus what we saw from Bryce Elder, I think we kind of got our answer in both cases. The Phillies, they struggled against A.J. early, but they figured him out by the 3rd or 4th inning that they were dealing with him.
Yeah, really, for both guys. I mean, Elder first time through looked fabulous, and I think Smith-Shawver first time through. So you piggyback those guys, give them 2 innings each instead of sending them out there for that 3rd inning, and you do it that way and let them just each go through the order one time. Maybe we are talking about it, a different game in that situation as we sit here and kind of second guess. But, Smith-Shawver, he's 20. The guy has incredible stuff, and he's going to be able to get out. There's still a lot of growth there for him too. You can see it somewhat effectively wild at times. He just doesn't have the command of his pitches, but certainly the stuff is there and you can see the promise. But home runs are something he's definitely struggled with in his very, very small sample size at the big league level.
Yeah, and again, with the Phillies getting such a huge performance from Aaron Nola, the Braves offense being a bit of a concern at this point with just 6 runs scored in the series, some things are going to have to change as they head into game 4 of the series, and they have their backs clearly and just pressed against the wall about as hard as you can hoping that Spencer Strider can come out and replicate what he did in game one and give you that chance to at least bring this series back to Atlanta. That's as I talked about after game three, you play all these games, you get that best record. You hope to have the opportunity for that home field advantage to be meaningful for you. Well, the Braves are going to have to win one in hostile territory before they're able to have the opportunity to win this series. They're not going to be able to win it in game four, but they can certainly keep it going. And that's what Atlanta's going to try to do behind Spencer Strider in game four of this series. We got a little bit more to get to. We're going to get you set up for that game four. Before we do, though, we're going to take one more quick break. I want to tell you about another great sponsor of ours, as it is FanDuel, who brings you this episode of the Braves Postcast. We know October baseball is back, and you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Join FanDuel today. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on the action from first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. All kinds of options for you. And if you don't want to wait for the whole game to get a win, well, predict what will happen with that next at-bat quick bets. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, time to get into game four of this series, Jake. And we know for the Braves, this is win or go home. And after a season in which their offense was historic and their offense was the best in all of baseball, they're going to hope that that group wakes up in a big-time way as they will face Ranger Suarez, and I would assume the Phillies bullpen in a very similar role to what they did in game one. Suarez was out by the fourth, but pitched well while he was in, and the Phillies emptied out that bullpen in order to close things out. I would think that that would be the MO for the Phillies and Rob Thompson in game four. But for the Braves, Spencer Strider gave them everything that they could have asked for, I think, in that first game. 7 innings of 2-run ball. They're going to need a similar performance to set them up for a win against a very tough Phillies team that has hit the ball better than the Braves have in the series and have the extra added adrenaline and momentum of playing in front of that raucous sellout crowd at Citizens Bank Park yet again on Thursday.
Yeah, going to be, a big game for Strider, obviously. And if you're the Braves, first of all, you got to figure out a way to win game one in these series. If you're going to keep winning the divisions and getting these buys, you got to figure out a way to win game one. But you're still sitting here in a situation where you have Strider going in game four and you got Max Fried waiting, hopefully at home in a game five. Certainly not out of this yet. And while you're capable of getting a great start from Spencer Strider, one like you got in game one, or maybe, he's capable of obviously doing even better.
Yep.
I think that's a lot to ask of him. And I think this offense obviously clearly has to step up. I mean, I don't think you can just put all that pressure on Strider to say, go out there and be perfect. We'll try to score 2 or 3 runs for you and hope that sticks. What I'm looking for in this game, I need to see this offense get back to the way that it was in the regular season. I need to see 6 runs or more in this game and just to feel that confidence in this offense again. I feel confident in Strider going out there and having a great start. And I think, he certainly can, and I'm expecting it from him and hoping it from him. But more than that, I need to see this offense get on track. Like I said earlier, it's do or die. You've seen some signs of it, the end of game 2, getting 10 hits in this game, but this is the time. I need to see this offense step up and start getting some big hits, putting up some big numbers, getting out early, getting that momentum. We talked about it coming into this one. Could the Braves carry that momentum from game 2? They scored early, took an early lead. May not remember that at this point. They had a 1-0 lead early. But the Phillies and that home run by Harper really just took it back. But want to see the Braves come and punch back and show some fight in this game, and then let's let Strider go to work and do his thing.
Yeah, I think the big question is, can this offense support Spencer Strider? You look at double-digit hits, but a bunch of guys left on base. The hit with runners in scoring position wasn't to be found for him. They had a couple of them, but only 1 extra base hit in this game. That's very un-Braves-like. And again, averaging just 2 runs per game and having been shut out at home for the first time all season long in game 1 with Spencer Strider on the mound. Those were a few things that just haven't gone right for you in the early going, offensively speaking. But Spencer Strider, I think, was the highlight of game 1. I know he allowed a run on an errant pickoff throw that helped the Phillies manufacture a run. He gave up a solo home run to Bryce Harper, but hey, what else is new? That guy hits a lot of home runs off a lot of different pitchers. and has done so in this series. But if he's able to replicate this, and we talked about it coming in to the series, Spencer Strider has faced the Phillies 8 times in the regular season. He's 8-0 against them. We know what happened in last year's NLDS when he was less than 100%. He's not going to make that excuse, doesn't need to make that excuse about his game one performance, most certainly. Now it's just about finding a way to beat this Phillies team in their third encounter in the postseason over the past 2 Octobers. But Strider, I mean, he's one of your keys to victory, but his offense has just become a question mark, and I just really did not expect that. Ronald Acuna Jr. got his first 2 hits of the series in this game. He stole another base. He's gotten on base a couple of times in game 2 after a quiet game 1. I would look at him, Jake, as a guy that needs to get this Braves offense ignited and going, but you're also kind of looking for some long balls here. Austin Riley and Travis d'Arnaud did it in game 2, but how about Matt Olson and how about Marcell Ozuna? He had a couple of hits, but also a couple of big strikeouts in this series already for him. So can you get some of the guys who were such big parts of this Braves run-scoring attack to find themselves in that moment and give the Braves the kind of punch and the kind of offense that they need to maybe give Spencer Strider a little bit more to work with than the Braves were able to give the slew of pitchers that went out there in game 3 of the series?
Yeah, that's what you're hoping for. Like we said at the top, it's got to be the whole lineup. I mean, we saw tonight, even with the top of the order getting on and timely hitting, not necessarily all getting their hits at the same time as well, but you need those guys at the bottom to step up. And you just even saw in this game, some of the hits they got, I mean, it wasn't hard contact. And that's not what we're accustomed to seeing from this Braves team. We're used to seeing them, lead the league in exit velocity. And it's just, you're not seeing a lot of that in this series for whatever reason. But, at this point, you can use the excuse of the 5-day layoff for that first game, maybe in the first 2 games for the offense being behind and a little bit sluggish.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the thick of it now. I mean, your adrenaline is pumping. The season is on the line. You've seen this for 3 games now. There are no more excuses. This offense has to get up and get going. And something they've really struggled with in this series, which maybe you remember, Grant. I don't remember in the regular season this team really struggling this much with high fastballs. Now, I know a lot of teams and a lot of people, a lot of hitters are going to struggle trying to hit 97, 98 at the top of the zone. It's not easy, but I feel like this is something the Phillies have exploited in this series. Even Aaron Nola, who doesn't have a huge fastball, he was getting strikeouts at the top of the zone. And I would imagine they're going to try to employ that same game plan with their high velocity relievers coming in and relief in game 4 as well. So, that's something I don't know what the Braves, you got to do if you're going to get on the pitching machine and just shoot up high fastballs and BP, something to get on time to get to these fastballs, because it's something they've really struggled with, not just swinging and missing at them, but not being able to lay off those pitches right above the zone as well. So if I'm looking at one area of this Braves offense, which I just didn't see coming, it's just really struggling with the high velocity at the top of the zone in this series.
Yeah, and I think that that's a sign of one thing in particular, and that's pressing. And that's just, altering your approach. And the Braves' approach has been extremely effective all year long. And sometimes people wonder, well, why are they swinging at this first pitch? The Braves have had great success with their approach and with being aggressive early in counts. And, baseball has taken note of that, but for some reason, they continue to throw these guys a lot of strikes. And a lot of times that first pitch is the best one you're going to get. But I don't know that there is an easy answer for this. And obviously, they're doing what they can to try to figure it out. I agree with you. I don't think that the layoff can really be something that's on your mind at this point when you've played 3 games now and you're going into the 4th one. And, you can't really, I think, look backwards at this point. And I think staying in the moment was something Austin Riley talked a lot about after the win in game 2 of the series. And maybe that's something that the Braves are going to have to try and do a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know that there are some easy answers for this other than, this is a very talented team. And at some point they've got to break out and break through. I know Max Fried said that after game 2 as well, but this has been a very surprising turn of events for a Braves offense that did well head to head against Philly and obviously had the kind of historic season that they did, leading Major League Baseball in home runs and in runs scored and so many other offensive stats. But, the Phillies are going to be up for this game. Their fans are going to be rabid. By the end of the game, we heard the "We Want Strider" chant echoing through Citizens Bank Park, in addition to a really nice rendition of the Tomahawk Chop a couple of times. And, that aside, this crowd's ready for it. They're feeling it. And that means that Phillies dugout's going to be getting that same kind of energy, because there's been a little back and forth in this series, whether you want to believe different things about what was said or not said in the Braves clubhouse after the game 2 win. but I don't think you needed to write any extra narratives to know that two division rivals were going to want to go head-to-head against one another and come out on top, considering the history between these two clubs.
Yeah, you don't need anything added to this series. Maybe there was a narrative that's been pushed to kind of make it even bigger at this point, but these are two really good teams. They're division rivals that face off a lot, very familiar with each other. We knew all that coming in, and the Braves have gotten the better of the Phillies. Look, they are the better team. They prove it over 162. They proved it in the head-to-head matchups, but you got to prove it in October. You got to prove it in the postseason. That's all anybody's going to remember, and this is their time. Again, you have Strider, you have Fried. And these games, those are pitchers that are good enough to get it done. This offense has to step up and be the offense that it was all year long. And if they do that, I have all the confidence in the world that this Braves team can come back and win this series.
Well, the Braves backs are squarely against the wall at this point. They're down 2-1 to the Phillies in the NLDS. We know that they were dispatched in 4 games a year ago, but they didn't have the Spencer Strider that they had this year, healthy and ready to go in a do-or-die, win-or-go-home kind of game. And, of course, we know that Game 5 is the scenario in which Atlanta could bring the series home, and maybe that will be a difference maker. But we can't talk about Game 5 until we get through Game 4, and that will see Spencer Strider on the mound starting for the Atlanta Braves against Ranger Suarez of the Philadelphia Phillies, a rematch of the Game 1 pitching matchup between these two teams. The 6:07 p.m. first pitch time as we record this. If the Dodgers get knocked out, though, MLB will flex that start time to 8:07 p.m. Eastern time. That, of course, not something we were able to stay up as late as maybe some would need us to find that out. But check your local listing, 6:07 for the time being, as the Braves and the Phillies will meet again in Game 4 of this series. That brings us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta right here on YouTube. Give us those likes and comments. Share the show with a friend. We appreciate you making us part of your baseball podcast and postcast and video regimen as well. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. Once again, your final score, Braves drop to the Phillies 10-2 in Game 3, trail the NLDS 2-1. They will look to get another win, get back in the series, and send it back home to Atlanta on Thursday behind Spencer Strider. That'll wrap things up for us. Again, thanks for joining us, and until next time, so long, everyone.